A novel is not supposed to comment on life. A novel is supposed to describe life. And so it's very difficult when the novelist turns preacher or philosopher or social critic and makes his characters give lectures. One would feel happier if one had a book of essays, you see, than if the characters were giving lectures. But he had to do this, and if you simply disregard this and don't approach the book as with having in your mind the prejudices which critics have instilled in you and which make you look for a novel as a novel, and everything has to be in this compartment, everything has to be in that compartment, just so, then you find that this is an astonishing book. Just take it for what it is. Now, as I said, he made himself a sitting duck for all kinds of critical derision because of these very far out and peculiar ideas which constitute the underlying philosophy of the book. And I want to start by some sort of reminiscence about Aldous Huxley to show how he moved to this position, or this complex of positions, and where he started from. This may be absolutely old news to some of you, but I want to sum it up in a certain way and couple it with some personal reminiscences. Back in the early 1930s, Aldous Huxley was a liberating force for very many people, young people, especially in England, recovering from the effects of British education. British education for the middle and upper classes is based on private schools, although they're called public schools. And this kind of education instills a certain very definite attitude to life. Aldous Huxley went to Eton, which is the public school of public schools. It is the cream. All the top men in the Foreign Office and in politics and in law, and indeed too in the church, are graduates of Eton. And the poor boys there wear the most ridiculous clothes. They wear short monkey jackets and long pants without turn-ups at the bottom, with a vaguely dark grey in color, and very wide starched collars, black neckties and top hats. Every unfortunate child that is admitted to Eton has to wear this outfit. When you get older, they graduate to long jackets instead of the short ones. The short jackets are there to enable them to be more easily flogged. And the entire discipline of the English school is based on flogging. And you will find in Aldous Huxley's novels a perennial interest in the subject, because that is a kind of mark instilled into English life. And they take a peculiar pride in it. And there's quite a discourse, you'll remember, at one point in Ireland, where he shows that all cultures based on flogging, where the children are brought up that way, spare the rod and spoil the child, as in the book of Proverbs, believe that God is totally other. God is transcendent and authoritative and the father figure, whereas cultures not based on flogging go to Tatvam Asi, that is to say, the fundamental identity of the root and ground of the individual being with the root and ground of the universe. It's an amusing aside. It's not quite accurate, but it's very fascinating. You see, he came out of this background. In these English schools, they're all basically Church of England. There are a few public schools that are Roman Catholic or Presbyterian. One of the worst public schools of all is Fettes in Scotland, which is very aristocratic and very rigorous and Presbyterian. And you can imagine how ghastly the combination of Calvinism and spare the rod and spoil the child, and plain food can be. The food, incidentally, in these schools is unspeakable. English cooking is not very good at the best. In fact, all these schools are fundamentally based on the idea that suffering builds character. And so anything that you inflict by way of suffering on the younger children is justified because you know you are doing them a service. In other words, you can lash them and pull their hair, you can hang them upside down by their heels, you can throw bricks at them, you can do anything and torture them in all sorts of ways. We had, for example, a boy in school who was Mohammedan and was excused from church services. And he was an object of utter contempt and derision. The whole philosophy basically was suffering builds character. Therefore, the infliction of suffering upon one's inferiors is justified. And as you go up the hierarchy through your 4 years, you see, you become privileged at the end to inflict suffering uniquely and to have no suffering inflicted upon you. On the other side, and one might say on the positive side of this education, it really is quite extraordinary how much you learn of a certain kind of knowledge. When we were 16 years old, we were reading Plato in Greek. When we were 15 years old, we finished our general education. That is to say, we took an examination which is called the school certificate. And that qualifies you as being generally educated in mathematics, foreign languages, Latin, Greek, history, geography, and such matters. Thereafter, you start specializing. And you can go into mathematics or chemistry and physics. They don't divide those at first. For example, if you're taking a pre-med training, you go into chemistry and physics and a bit of biology. If you're going to be a clergyman, you take medieval history. And from 15 on, when you take this, you specialize. So that the end years of a British gentleman's education correspond to at least 2 or 3 years of college in this country. So that by the time he does go to college, he goes to, say, Oxford or Cambridge, he is completely specialized. No more general courses on anything. And his method of going through college in the days in which Huxley went through college is very different from what we would go through now in college in the United States, because you're absolutely on your own. Nobody gives a damn what you do with your time. All they ask is that you pass the examinations at the end of your 3 years. See, they have 3 years to get through. Now, if you're a gentleman, you must never give the appearance of doing any work. So all the time you're actually in college, you're supposed to devote yourself to frivolities, to sports, to amazing parties, great dinners, to outrageous exploits like climbing towers and putting chamber pots on the highest possible pinnacles, and all these sorts of exploits. Then they have what they call the long vacation. They have 10 weeks of summer vacation, and that's when you're supposed to hit the books. You go home to your country estate with the books and really bone up on everything, you see, so that you can make the effect of getting through college without turning a finger.